For 40 years, no one knew. The real reason behind that 3-hour delay during the Godfather shoot remained a secret. The official explanation was artistic crisis, while the press called it Brando's perfectionism. But when Francis Ford Coppola's private archive was opened in 2011, researchers found a tape. The label had only a date, March 13, 1971, and a warning, never to be released, FFC. Coppola kept that tape hidden for 40 years because its contents could have destroyed Brando's image. What happened on set? Why Brando was locked in his trailer for 3 hours? Why the crew was crying? It was all hidden in that 18-minute recording. Brando spoke to the camera as if he were talking to his own therapist, not to the camera. And what he confessed was one of Hollywood's best-kept secrets. The greatest performances sometimes take an actor's mind away. If Hollywood's hidden history and the real price actors pay interest you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because this story reveals one of the darkest moments in cinema history. Saturday, March 13th, 1971. The set in New York's Little Italy neighborhood was ready at 6:30 a.m. The scene to be filmed that day was one of the most emotional moments in The Godfather, the first scene after the death of Don Vito Corleone's son, Sonny. Brando had been preparing for this moment for weeks. According to the principles of method acting, he needed to feel, internalize, and live through a real loss. He had slept for only 4 hours the night before, had not eaten breakfast that morning, and when he arrived on set, his eyes were red. He had already started crying. Francis Ford Coppola considered this normal because that was Brando. He completely immersed himself in the character. But what happened that day was anything but normal. The first take began at 9:15 a.m. Brando was on stage in costume, and he was Vito Corleone. The camera was rolling, the lights were set, and Coppola said, "Action." Brando began his performance, slow movements, a broken voice, tears streaming from his eyes. Everything was perfect, until the third take. Brando was sitting on the chair on stage, delivering his lines, and suddenly stopped. Silence. Coppola waited, thinking maybe Brando was just gathering himself for a moment, but 10 seconds passed, then 20 seconds. Brando got up and started walking without looking at the camera. "Marlon!" Coppola called out. There was no answer. Brando left the set, walked to his trailer, opened the door, went inside, and closed it behind him. The sound of the lock clicking was heard from inside. For the first 15 minutes, no one was worried. Brando sometimes took breaks like this. He needed to be alone to concentrate. But after 30 minutes, the production assistant knocked on the door. No answer. Coppola went over, knocked gently on the door, and said, "Marlon, are you ready?" There was no sound from inside. An hour passed. The crew was waiting. The cameras were idle, and Paramount Pictures was losing thousands of dollars every minute. Coppola was now starting to worry. Was Brando depressed? Was he contemplating suicide? Was it the alcohol he had drunk the night before? He knocked harder on the door. "Marlon, open the door, please!" Again, silence. He heard no movement, no sound from inside. By 11:30 a.m., studio executives were talking frantically on the phone. "Break down the door," they said. "Find someone else to replace him. Cancel the shoot." But Coppola knew that without Brando, there was no soul to The Godfather. Paramount was already skeptical about this project. The budget was being exceeded, and Brando was already a problematic choice. Old, fat, and almost forgotten in Hollywood. Now, his disappearance for hours on set would give the studio the perfect excuse to say, "See, we told you so." Coppola stood at the door and tried one last time. "Marlon, talk to me. We'll do whatever you want, but please come out." This time, a sound came from inside, but not speech, just movement. It sounded like Brando was stirring something. Then silence again. 2 hours and 45 minutes had passed. Most of the crew had left. Only Coppola, cinematographer Gordon Willis, and a few close assistants remained. Even Al Pacino had returned because the scene couldn't be shot. Everyone was starting to give up. Then, at 2 p.m., the trailer door slowly opened. Brando came out. His eyes were swollen, his face was pale, and he had a small cassette in his hand. Coppola was relieved but also stunned. Brando's expression was unlike anything he had ever seen. Fear, shame, or just exhaustion. Brando walked slowly, approached Coppola, and whispered, "You need to listen to this. Play it for the crew. Then decide." He left the tape in Coppola's hand and went back to his trailer. This time he didn't close the door. He just sat inside and waited. Coppola didn't listen to the tape right away. First, he tried to figure out what Brando meant. What was the tape? An explanation, an apology, or a farewell? He looked at Gordon Willis and said, "Get the tape player." A few minutes later, a small group, Coppola, Willis, the production manager, and 2 assistants, gathered in a quiet area near the trailer. Coppola inserted the tape into the machine and pressed play. The first 10 seconds was silence, then Brando's voice came on. But this wasn't the voice of Vito Corleone. This was Marlon Brando's own voice, broken, weary, and helpless. The recording began like this. "Today is March 13th, 1971. It's around 12:30 in the afternoon. I am Marlon Brando. No, I am Vito Corleone. No, I don't know anymore." A long pause. Then he continued, "I am making this recording because I can't go to my therapist, and someone needs to understand this. Maybe Francis, maybe the crew, maybe just my future self. I don't know what it is, but something is wrong." Coppola froze. Brando's voice was trembling, and breathing sounds could be heard in the background. "I've been using method acting for years. I learned it from Elia Kazan. I learned it from Stella Adler. Get into the character, live the truth, don't fake it. I was Stanley Kowalski in Streetcar. I was Terry Malloy in Waterfront. Each time, a part of me stayed in the role, but I could come back. But Vito is different." The silence on the tape stretched out. Then Brando continued. "Every morning when I look in the mirror, I see Vito. I talk like him. I move like him. He's even in my dreams at night. Last night I dreamed I saw my son. No, Sonny, dead. I woke up crying. Real tears. But Sonny isn't my son. He's a character. But my brain doesn't see the difference anymore." Coppola looked at the group. Everyone's face was blank. "This is dangerous," Brando's voice continued. "The line between character and reality is disappearing. Yesterday, someone bumped into me at the market, and I almost looked at him like Vito and threatened him. Then I realized, I'm not an actor anymore. I am Vito. And that scares me." The tape continued, growing darker with every second. "Stella said something to me years ago. Marlon, the method is dangerous if you can't find your way back." I laughed then. Now I understand. The way back is lost. Am I Marlon Brando or Vito Corleone? Even when I talk to my kids at home, I use Vito's voice. They look at me strangely, but I can't stop. It's not just a costume, not just a role. It's a takeover. Brando's voice broke, and sobs came. The crew looked at each other, some wiping their eyes. Today on set, I was filming Sonny's death scene. Normally an actor says, "This is fiction, it's not real." But I really felt the pain, physical pain in my chest, and I realized, this isn't Marlon's pain, It's Vito's pain. I'm no longer the vehicle. I am the character. The most striking part of the tape was coming. This is destroying me. Every day a little more of Marlon disappears, and a little more of Vito remains. And the worst part is, this will be my best performance. People will watch this movie and say, Marlon Brando is great. But the truth is, this performance comes at the cost of my sanity. If I win an Oscar, which I probably will, that award won't be a victory. It'll be a funeral. Because Marlon Brando will die and Vito Corleone will live. A long silence. Maybe this is the ultimate level of method acting. Maybe the greatest performance is to lose yourself completely. But no one told me there might be no coming back. Brando's recording was almost over. Francis, if you're listening, you have to make a decision. I can continue. I can finish filming as Vito. But I want you to know, I'm not acting anymore. I'm living. And this might be my last film, because I don't know if I can go back to being Marlon Brando after this. The last sentence came in a whisper. Maybe I don't want to go back. The tape ended. Coppola stopped the tape, and no one spoke. Gordon Willis was wiping his eyes. The production manager shook his head and whispered, "My God." Coppola took the tape and walked to Brando's trailer. Inside, Brando was sitting, his hands trembling, his eyes staring into space. "I listened," Coppola said. Brando raised his head and waited. "And I understood," the director continued. "But I'll tell you something, Marlon. You're right. This performance could kill you, but it will also change the history of cinema. People will see the power of method acting, and they will also learn its price. If you want to continue, I'm with you. But if you want to stop, I'll understand that too." Brando was silent for a long time. Then he slowly stood up, adjusted his costume, and whispered, "Let's continue, but on one condition. Every scene we shoot today will be in one take, because every retake strengthens Vito and weakens Marlon. I can't take it anymore." Coppola agreed. From that day on, the rest of the Godfather's filming changed. Brando rehearsed as little as possible, scenes were finished in 1 or 2 takes, and shooting ended early every day. The crew now saw Brando differently, not just as a difficult actor, but as an artist in pain. And Brando's tape was never played again. Coppola locked it away in his own archive and didn't show it to anyone for 40 years. When The Godfather was released in 1972, critics called Brando's performance the best of his career. Don Vito Corleone was now one of the most iconic characters in cinema history. In 1973, Brando won an Oscar, but he didn't attend the ceremony. He sent a Native American activist in his place to refuse the award. The official explanation was a political protest, but the truth was much deeper. Brando couldn't accept that award because it was given to Vito Corleone, not Marlon Brando. And Brando, as he said on that tape, no longer knew the difference between the two. The following years proved everything Brando had said. He never again gave a performance like the one in The Godfather. In The Godfather Part 2, the younger version of Vito Corleone was played by Robert De Niro because Brando refused the role. "I can't play that character again," he said. He appeared in films like Last Tango in Paris and Apocalypse Now during the rest of the 1970s, but none were as heartfelt as The Godfather, because Brando never fully immersed himself in a character again. He was guarded now, keeping his distance, moving away from method acting. In interviews about acting, he always issued the same warning. Method is dangerous. It can cost you your identity. When Coppola's archive was opened in 2011 and that tape surfaced, film historians were shocked. Brando's crisis that day was no longer a legend, but a documented fact. The tape transcript was published in academic journals, sparking new debates about method acting. Acting schools began using the tape as teaching material, both as inspiration and as a warning. Because Brando's stories showed that the greatest art sometimes requires the greatest sacrifice, and that sacrifice sometimes means the artist loses themselves. When you watch The Godfather today, you can see traces of Marlon Brando's 3-hour crisis in every movement, every word, every silence of Don Vito Corleone. That performance was perfect because it was real. Brando wasn't acting, he was living. But the price of that perfection was an actor losing his own identity. The most brilliant example of method acting is also its darkest warning. The deeper you immerse yourself in your character, the harder it becomes to return to yourself. Brando's 18-minute confession, recorded in his trailer and played back to the crew, is one of Hollywood's most striking documents. It questions not just an actor's crisis, but the nature of art itself. Where does acting end and identity loss begin? When is a performance a triumph? And when is it a tragedy? Brando didn't answer these questions, but he lived them. And his legacy is not just magnificent performances, but also a warning. Giving everything for art sometimes means losing everything. That tape is preserved in Coppola's archive today. When Brando died in 2004, Coppola never listened to the tape again. "There's no need," he said in an interview, "because every word on that tape is already seen in every frame of the film. Marlon gave us his greatest performance, and we gave him the greatest pain, oblivion, because everyone remembers Vito Corleone, but how many remember the Marlon who vanished behind that performance?" This may be the essence of Brando's tragedy. He became immortal as a character, but vanished as a human being.